For years, Britain has been waiting for a way of stopping the cross-channel migrant boats that is both effective and humane. Has it finally arrived? The deal announced earlier this evening between Britain and France was never a given. Plenty of expert observers thought it couldn't be negotiated. But here it is, as described by Keir Starmer standing next to President Macron a little earlier on.
For the very first time, migrants arriving via small boat will be detained and returned to France in short order. In exchange for every return, a different individual will be allowed to come here via a safe route, controlled and legal, subject to strict security checks, and only open to those who have not tried to enter the UK illegally.
This does feel like a real step forward, but we can't yet know whether it will actually work, because that depends upon how powerful the psychological deterrent actually is for determined and desperate migrants. The numbers are small to start with. Few great struggles were overcome with a pilot scheme. But the gamble, if you like, is that it'll just make taking the risk of crossing the channel too high. If you've paid smugglers a lot of money to get to Britain, and then you find out you might be sent straight back, do not pass go, then you might have second thoughts. You might look for alternative life options. I don't know. Nobody knows. What I do know is that channel migration has been a running sore in British politics for years, helping to upend almost everything. It has been the subject of passionate argument at Westminster and around the country, at elections and between elections. It's been a big driver of support for Nigel Farage and reform, now, according to the pollsters, Britain's most popular political party. And yet, amid all the political hubbub, the migrant numbers have just kept rising remorselessly. In 2018, 299 people crossed by boat. 5 years later, it was 45,000. This year, we're on track for another record year. As Starmer himself said today, it can't go on like this. In the last 7 years, more than 160,000 people have tried to cross the channel in small boats. But it isn't just about the numbers, or the cost to the taxpayer, or even the danger of the crossing. This is about the complete inability of the British state to do something that voters want it to do. It's about uselessness. And if Keir Starmer fails with this new scheme working with the French, then he and his party will pay a very, very high price. And now to Lord Peter Ricketts, the former National Security Advisor and also our former ambassador in Paris. Peter, very good to have you on the show again. What did you make of this agreement? Lots and lots of warm words on both sides, but do you think this is one that will stick? Because, as I said just now, lots of legal challenges too.
There are indeed, Andrew. Could I just first of all take exception with your statistics at the beginning? Yes, the numbers of small boat crossings have gone up, but when I was ambassador in 2015, there were thousands of migrants jumping on lorries and hiding in camper vans and jumping on trains. So this has been going on for almost 2 decades, really, since David Blunkett closed down the Songat camp in the early 2000s. And this is a step forward, definitely. I mean, you can say a breakthrough. British governments, ever since we left the EU, have been trying to persuade France to adopt a returns policy. This is the first time they've done it. It's not going to be a night and day change to the position because it's only going to be small, even if it builds up beyond the initial pilot scheme. But it is certainly something the government's wanted to do. As you rightly say, it is not a done deal yet. I've been squirreling in the detail of the written declaration they put out, and there's quite a significant sentence that says it'll be finalised subject to completing prior legal scrutiny in full transparency and understanding with the Commission and EU member states. And we know that quite a lot of EU member states have got a problem. So there's still a hoop to be jumped through by the French with the EU and conceivably also legal challenges, as you were saying, in the UK. So I don't think it's for sure that they're going to start very quickly, but it is an important signal of determination by the two of them, a determination they've been communicating, transmitting all the way through this summit. And so, we've certainly had a step forward here.
That was a very important point you raised just now about the other European countries, particularly the Mediterranean southern countries. Can you remind people listening why they might have a problem with this deal?
Well, first of all, this is, of course, a much wider problem than just the UK. We have the numbers you've been talking about, but countries of the Mediterranean, Italy, Greece, Spain, I mean, they have hundreds of thousands of migrants arriving across the Mediterranean. France, I think, gets over 100,000 a year as well. So this is part of a wider problem. And I think what the Southern Europeans are worried about is if the idea starts that you can return migrants to the country they've come from, well, quite soon, EU member states will be trying to return tens of thousands of migrants to Italy, Greece, and Spain. And so you can understand that they are worried about that. They think they already take, a far greater share of the burden than they should, and they see this as a slippery slope.
But one of the points you hear from some of the Mediterranean countries, and indeed from President Macron, is that an awful lot of the people arriving in the southern borders of Europe are indeed heading for Britain because we have a system, an economy and a legal system which makes it relatively easy to find work in the black market or the grey market and get access to housing and free healthcare and the rest of it. And when President Macron said quite openly to Keir Starmer, do you know what, you guys have got to get your house in order. You've got to be less of a magnet for migration. Do you think he had a point, and do you think this is a big issue for the British government?
Again, it's not a new point. I mean, it's been the, what migrants say, the myth, if you like, that you get to a kind of El Dorado if you can cross the channel to the UK. Partly it's about language. They find it easier, I think, to integrate into an English-speaking country, partly because there isn't the mandatory ID card system. And yes, there is the idea that the black market is easier to get into. You can disappear into the undergrowth in London and work. Now, whether or not that's true, that is certainly what I think has gone down the social media lines in the migrant routings, and British governments have been trying to get ahead of that and have never been able to do so. So this is part of beginning to show, I think, that Britain is a much tougher country for migrants to get to, and even if you get to, you might find yourself being deported from. And so, yes, the messaging is important here, perhaps, as the actual numbers being returned.
A very important moment nonetheless. Lord Ricketts, Peter Ricketts, thank you very much indeed for talking to me.